One of Street Fighter's most beloved characters, Ken Masters. He is a docile and courageous family man, but don't let that fool you. Attack him if you dare and he will most likely crush you. In this episode, we're going to focus on the updated story of Ken Masters, info in his timeline, theories, and other forms that you might not know of. Without further ado, let me welcome you to the Street Fighter verse. The original concept of Ken Masters is said to be made by Shuei Okano and Akira Akiman Yasuda. In the initial designs of Ken Masters, Akira Yasuda uses Beni Urquides from the Shikakui Jungle appearance as the layout for Ken Masters. The Shikakui Jungle manga was written by Iki Kajiwara. Kajiwara was a Japanese author, manga writer, and film producer. He is also responsible for the creation of Karate Baka Ichidai, which translated means Karate Master, where Ryu and Sagat origins are from. Karate Master is a Japanese manga drawn by Jiro Tsunoda and Joya Kagemaru, with the story written by Iki Kajiwara. The story was inspired by the life of the real-life martial artist Mas Oyama. Part of Ken's creation was also inspired by a real-life karate world champion named Joe Louis. Jay Lewis was an American kickboxer, point karate fighter, and actor. As a fighter, Lewis gained fame for his matches in the 1960s and 1970s. He has twice been voted the greatest fighter in karate history, having won innumerable karate tournaments, and has attained the titles of United States Heavyweight Kickboxing Champion, World Heavyweight Full Contact Karate Champion, and United States National Black Belt Kata Champion. Like Ken, Lewis was a blonde American who trained in a traditional style in Japan, then went back to the US to become a famous champion. Lewis also founded Full Contact Karate and became a world champion at that as well. In addition to his similar looks, Lewis was also known, as were many American karate fighters of his time, for using colored karate uniforms, including a red one. Lewis notably appeared on the cover of Combat magazine, dressed in red with a black belt. He challenged traditional karate ways and modified much of his original Shorin Ryu style, similar to Ken's modifications that distinguish him from Ryu, a traditional fighter. It is one of the major modern Okinawan martial arts and is one of the oldest styles of karate. It was named by Shoshin Shibana in 1933, but the system itself is much older. Apparently, when Ken was about 12 years old, his father, a rich hotel tycoon owner, thought that his son needed to learn about discipline, or his son would become a spoiled brat all of his life and try to leech onto the master's family fortune. In order to do so, the elder masters sent Ken to Japan to train under his best friend, the mysterious karate master Goken. At first, Ken was very hesitant to learn from Goken, wanting to go back to the United States, but later began to respect his master. He even enjoyed the company of Goken's adopted son, Ryu, since he had a foil to finally pull pranks on, although this got Ken into a lot of trouble. Ryu and Ken would later become best friends and each other's principal rivals. When Ryu was 23, Goken decided that both of his students had grown up to be fine fighters and decided that their training was over and could now leave the dojo. Ryu decided to travel the world in order to continue his training, whereas Ken was finally happy to be going back home to the United States after his years of straining his back for his master Goken and finally learning the meaning of humility. After coming home, Ken competed in many different martial arts tournaments held in the United States, winning most of them. Ken's personality is the complete opposite of Ryu's. Masters is stylish, unorthodox, and unpredictable. Ken Masters has a giant ego, in which he constantly reminds his opponents how great he is. While sometimes he might come out as super confident and arrogant, he is generally kind, friendly, a good person, and very easygoing, which led him into starting a family of his own. He is the father of Mel Masters and husband to Eliza Masters, which is Gal's wife's sister. He never backs down from a fight, no matter how difficult it looks. Starting from the original Street Fighter, it is said that Ken's natural hair color is as black as his long and spiky eyebrows, but he has dyed it blonde. In the original Street Fighter, Ken fought barefoot and wore yellow armbands without gloves, unlike his rival Ryu, who originally wore red slippers with sparring gloves and began fighting barefooted in subsequent games. Ken is most easily recognized by wearing different sparring gloves that are either the color of his blonde hair or red. Ken wears brown gloves in most other appearances. Ken wears a red sleeveless karate gi, with a black belt with neatly torn off sleeves, similar to Ryu's, and it is usually seen in better shape than Ryu's, except for in the Street Fighter 3 series, since he can easily afford to keep up and/or own spares. Capcom has officially stated that a red karate gi was chosen to stand out and to reflect his more flashy style of fighting. For Street Fighter 3, Ken was supposed to be given new techniques, but the staff refrained from it as they found him overpowered. By the time of Street Fighter 5, Ken's appearance has undergone the first major design change in the character's history. Ken's G-top now hangs around his waist, and he wears a black V-neck training shirt with several red linings in its place. He sports black sparring gloves and has his hair tied back in a top knot instead of hanging loose, which was grown into medium length after the events of Street Fighter 3 series, and now wears black ankle wraps with red linings instead of barefoot. For this game, Capcom wanted to differentiate these two characters' moves, since they have been seen as clones. He added, "Ken's more of the hothead. He's the one that's going to rush you down and be in your face. So his V-skill is a run move that can be used to constantly pressure your opponent." Ken was originally named after Street Fighter planner Hiroshi Matsumoto. Hiroshi is a Japanese game director, producer, and sound designer, one of the men who is credited for having created the Fatal Fury and Art of Fighting series. Hiroshi changed Ken's name to Mean Fist instead during his development. He gained his last name when toy company Hasbro got the license to add the characters from Street Fighter 2 to their G.I. Joe toy line. It is widely believed, though never confirmed, that the name was given to avoid copyright confusion with the character of the same name from Mattel's Barbie toy line, Ken. If there is one thing we love about Ken Masters, it's his 1980s Metal Glory Days inspired music. As soon as the round starts, the melodic tone prepares you for battle. But do you ever wonder who created this epic nostalgic melody that we all grew to cherish and love? Well, it comes from the legendary music producers Yoko Shimomura and Isao Abe. Both were the main musicians and composers for the Street Fighter series. Shimomura's work can be recognized in many different video game franchises during the years. Some of Shimomura's most recognized works can be seen in the titles like Kingdom Hearts, Parasite Eve, Breath of Fire, and others. The first and most famous work produced by Isao Abe in Street Fighter 2 was the composition of the main theme for the character Sagat, including its unique time signature, as well as the original versus melody. And here comes a new challenger. Jingles that would serve as templates for the company's future fighting games. Inspiration for video game music at the time was always a derivative of a popular song or theme. It is no exception with Ken's stage music. Here's an example of the similarities between Yoko Shimomura's Ken Street Fighter version. Now, let us hear the version from Cheap Trick Mighty Wings from the Top Gun movie soundtrack. Sounds familiar, right? Well, the composer has been asked about this and has stated it was not an intentional inspiration. Some fans have pointed out that Ken's theme song sounds similar to the Cheap Trick song Mighty Wings from Top Gun. I have heard people say that, says Yoko Shimomura, and I watched the movie before I composed the song, so I can't deny I may have been inspired subconsciously. But I did not go into it thinking, okay, I'm gonna make this song sound like Mighty Wings. It was also stated that Ken's background theme was originally intended to be for Guile's stage. It would have made more sense in our opinion, since Guile was in the military and the similarity between Top Gun's Mighty Wings song, but either way Guile's theme is perfect as is. We could say that they made the right choice. Other attributes from Ken Masters' origins can be found behind the creation of Battle Harbor. Ken's stage is located in the United States of America. It serves as Ken's home stage. Is in a port near a sleepy small town of a city county. According to local stories, Battle Harbor is said to have gotten its name back in the town's founding days when two men began to have fist fight of such proportions that it drew many of the citizens and even travelers down to the docks to see them duel. Since then, the place is known for having street fights nearly every day and is celebrated as a town tradition. Due to Battle Harbor's historic reputation, the board has seen even international guests and fighters from around the world clash on its grounds. Oddly enough, Ken's stage has a very peculiar similarity to a setting in the Charles Bronson movie, Hard Times. Hard Times is a 1975 crime film, marking the directorial debut of Walter Hill. It stars Charles Bronson as Chaney, a drifter fright hopping through Louisiana during the Great Depression, who competes in illegal bare-knuckle boxing matches. After forming a partnership with Speed, played by James Coburn, there's a scene in this movie where two men fight in a harbor setting, being surrounded by people in boats identical to the Street Fighter's Ken stage. In an interview with Capcom, the creator Akira Akiman Yasuda found inspiration in movies and all media alike. Akira Akiman quotes, "I remember stitching together a few movies to make a presentation. Streets of Fire and Charles Bronson's Hard Time were the ones I used back then. Basically, movies about fighting. I really took the chairman's words to heart. Use movies, he said. So I took that to mean we should just openly plagiarize them." To make matters more interesting, the Zangief stage has a similarity to a scene derived from this movie. Another interesting fact about Battle Harbor is that the car-breaking bonus stage uses the same graphics from Battle Harbor. In Street Fighter II, when Ken is selected as an opponent, the map shows this stage to be somewhere near Detroit, Michigan. This is further supported by the fact that in the Street Fighter II instruction manual, it states that this stage is somewhere near a large lake, and that Detroit sits on Lake Huron. Other media have placed this stage in other locations in the US, such as San Francisco, which is Ken's hometown in various media, Seattle, Washington State, and even New York City. The voice of Ken Masters and its actors has changed during the years. Each of the actors has given a new interpretation and flair to the Ken Masters legacy. We will mention in this list voice actors involved with the growth of Ken during the years. We will start with Tetsuya Iwanaga.
Hadouken! Shoryuken! Tatsumaki Tenpugyaku! Ikuze!
He voiced different versions of Ken Masters, for example, Namco x Capcom, Street Fighter Alpha Series, Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo, X-Men vs Street Fighters, Street Fighter EX and EX3, Marvel Superheroes vs Street Fighter, Pocket Fighter, Marvel vs Capcom 2. Next voice actor is Koji Tubi.
Ha! Hup! Hadouken! Shoryuken!
He was the voice actor for Street Fighter 3, New Generation and Second Impact. Another actor's name is Go Yamane.
Round 1. Fight!
He was the voice actor for Street Fighter EX2, Monster Maesuka. Voice actor of SNK vs Capcom, SVC Chaos, Yuji Kishi.
Oh!
Japanese voice actor from Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, Capcom vs SNK, Capcom vs SNK 2, Street Fighter 4 and 5, Street Fighter Tekken, Project X Zone series, and in English, Ruben Langdon.
I'll show you some hot moves! Hey, I was waiting for you. Come on!
Voice actor of Street Fighter 4 and Street Fighter 5. He also was the voice in Street Fighter Tekken. An interesting fact is that he is also the voice of Dante from the Devil May Cry series. If you check on the costumes in Street Fighter 5, Ken appears with a Dante costume, revealing the relationship between the series. While his original voice was a reuse of the Ryu audio samples. Beginning with Super Street Fighter 2, Ken's voice was performed by Kenji Haga. His father, a wealthy hotel tycoon owner, told Ken at the age of 12 that his son had to learn discipline or else he would become a spoiled brat and try to inherit their family fortune. In order to do so, the elder masters sent Ken to train under his best friend, the mysterious karate master, Gouken. At first, Ken was very hesitant to learn from Gouken, wanting to go back to the United States, but later began to respect his master. He even enjoyed the company of Gouken's adopted son, Ryu. Ryu and Ken would later become best friends and each other's principal rivals. In Street Fighter Alpha, Ken fought and won the premier US martial arts tournament that had been previously won by Charlie Nash, as well as meeting a very attractive girl named Eliza, who became his girlfriend. After winning the US martial arts tournament, the heroic story that Ryu defeated the Emperor of Muay Thai reaches his ears. He asks Ken what it means to be a true fighter. He wonders if he should use the same fist he used to defeat Sagat, or the other one Akuma uses to murder people. Ken sees that Ryu has gone back to his usual bad habit of overthinking things, and fights him as an attempt to wake him up. After defeating Ryu, Ken realizes he has been deeply troubled since his last victory over Sagat. He reminds Ryu to keep fighting in order to find the answer, and gives him his red hairband that whenever he feels lost, he should use it as a reminder of their fight, and to keep fighting to find the answer. Ryu happily takes the headband, and they both go their separate ways. Ken returns home and, with Eliza's support, begins training harder, knowing even with his recent feelings that Ryu is always stronger than he looks. Ken begins to wonder about his own life. Along the road to proving himself again, he encounters Karin, who tells him she has followed his career and is trying to best her rival Sakura. To prove she is superior, Ken advises her it's good to have a rival, not for supremacy, but to keep on training harder and focusing. Going off to meet up with Sakura, they have a friendly match and Ken finally realizes that Ryu has the right idea all along. Both he and Sakura begin to travel to find Ryu, but their path crosses with that of Shadowlu's dictator, M. Bison. Ken confronts him, but he is easily defeated and placed under Bison's hypnosis. Bison then uses brainwashed Ken to lure Ryu out of hiding. Once Ryu shows up, Bison makes Ken fight him. Ryu wins and manages to release Ken of Bison's mind control. Ryu then proceeds to fight Bison, but loses and, just like Ken before him, is turned into a slave of Bison's psycho power. Sagat appears and, enraged by Bison's actions, engages Ryu in an attempt to break Bison's mental grip on him. Ken, now free and aided by Sakura, attacks Bison. This intervention, along with Sagat's presence, makes Ryu come to his senses. Recovered, Ryu takes on Bison once more. Bison senses Ryu's dark power and attempts to manipulate Ryu's mind once again. At his friend's urging, Ryu resists and defeats Bison with a powerful Hadouken. Ken is happy to see his old friend again. With the promise of a new duel, the two part their ways. In Street Fighter 2, Ken receives a letter from Ryu where he describes his consistent immersion in daily training, which rekindled Ken's fighting spirit. Realizing that he's been slacking on his own training, Ken goes back into the world of fighting. After the events of Street Fighter 2, Ken is married to Eliza, something he had apparently vowed only to do after winning a decisive victory against Ryu. However, it is unknown if the two fought during the tournament, or if Ken actually won, if they even did. No details have been stated. In Street Fighter 2 Complete File, it states that he lost to Ryu and continued his training. In Super Street Fighter 4, when a new tournament is announced, Ken isn't sure whether to compete, as Eliza is now far along in pregnancy, and he doesn't want to leave her. Sensing his inner conflict, Eliza assures him that she'll be fine, and that the baby isn't due for a while yet, so he should go meet up with Ryu and tell him she says hi. Ken enters, and in the absence of gas stations near the location for the final, he parks his SUV in a convenient spot, calls Eliza to check on her, and continues the rest of the way on foot. Over the course of the tournament, he encounters his self-appointed rival, Rufus, although the results of that match are unknown. After the tournament, it is discovered that Gouken is still alive, and Ken and Ryu pursues him as he leaves. Ken is upset that Gouken has not said anything to them, but Gouken counters that they no longer need a master. Ken and Ryu head home on foot, and Rufus passes by them on his motorbike, calling them losers. Soon, however, Rufus's bike runs out of gas, and Ken and Ryu reach the SUV. Ken offers Rufus and his girlfriend Candy a lift, but Rufus refuses. Soon afterwards, their son is born, and they name him Mel. In Street Fighter V, Ken, Eliza, and Mel are invited into a party hosted by Karin. During the party, Ken reflects on the various sparring matches between him and Ryu. The family gets lost on the way to the party and encounters Birdie, who thinks they are trespassing, resulting in a fight with Ken. Karin arrives and offers Ken a pre-meal fight as an apology for Birdie attacking him, which Ken accepts. Afterwards, he and Eliza wonder about why Ryu isn't at the party. In A Shadow Falls, on the main story, Ken came to visit Ryu, who was in the middle of meditating after getting defeated in a sparring match with Ken. Ryu tells him that he will join them when his training is complete. Later, Ken arrives with the rest of the fighters called by Karin to the Kansuki estate, where they plan their first infiltration of the Shadowlu base. Ken, Chun-Li, and Cammy travel to Brazil to search for the first missing chess piece, held by Laura Matsuda. While there, he saves Sean from Fang, but he is then attacked by his older sister Laura, who mistakes him for an enemy. After the fight, Sean sorts out the misunderstanding by indicating the unconscious Shadowloo soldiers. Laura then decides to join them, but on the condition that Ken add Matsuda Jiu-Jitsu into his selection of online karate classes, which he agrees to. Chun-Li then leaves to assist Garing in the group's first infiltration. Ken remains with Laura, and the duo fend off more Shadowloo soldiers, with Ken taking out 3 with a single Shinryuken. Ken reunites with Ryu just before the group begins the final assault against Shadowloo. After Bison's final defeat at Ryu's hands and Shadowloo's destruction, Ken finds Ryu alone and meditating, and decides to have another friendly sparring match to see if Ryu has found his true answer. Ryu manages to defeat Ken, but drops his red headband. Ken hands it back to him, figuring he might still need it. The two are later seen sharing a friendly fist bump. In Street Fighter 3, a Brazilian teenager named Sean had been pestering him to become his student, and Ken reluctantly accepted, beginning to train him. Maintaining a home and raising a child has strained his relationship with Ryu. Ken gets in touch with Ryu and invites him to a Japanese hot spring inn. Ken also brings Sean along, but decides to do last-minute shopping for Eliza before flying to Japan. In reality, Ken purposely left Sean alone to see how he'll do in a street fight. Ken then entered the World Warrior tournament. He fought Sean in the tournament and won against him. However, he drops out upon realizing Ryu was defeated by Oro. Ken begins to train his son Mel in rudimentary fighting techniques. He also told Sean to go find Ryu and challenge him, giving him some free time with Eliza. He learned that Ryu had sought him out and traveled all the way to New York from Oakland for their long-awaited rematch. Tossing some friendly jabs at each other, both have a good fight, ultimately won by Ryu. Since then, Ken has continued to train Sean and Mel, handle his family and business, and keep up with his old friend Ryu. In Sean's ending, Ken wakes up Sean, who was beaten unconscious after being knocked down by his opponent in the first round. In Ken's ending, he wins his 3rd straight US Martial Arts tournament, which is a new record, and offers the trophy to Sean, who turns the offer down, wanting to earn it for himself. While Ryu is the more serious of the two, Ken is the complete opposite, stylish, unorthodox, and unpredictable. He is a highly skilled fighter with a giant ego, and constantly reminds his opponents about his greatness. In Ken's official bio, it states that former US national fighting champ and ex-VP of the Masters Foundation, accusations of orchestrating a criminal plot has forced Ken to abandon his family and business and into hiding. As stated by fandom, Violent Ken is obsessed with power, as all his winning quotes seem to focus on this obsession. His personality is somewhat similar to certain other characters, such as Evil Ryu and DiCapri. It is great to point out that the source of Violent Ken's power is based on Psycho Power. This is based on the mind control Bison had over Ken. A common misconception on the source of Violent Ken's power is that it originates from the Orochi power, a fictional power energy from SNK's The King of Fighters series. This is probably due to the purple flames in Violent Ken's Shoryuken, similar to those under the influence of the Riot of the Blood, and the skull pillar at the end of Shimbu Mesatsu. That is also an element shown in some Orochi power users like Rugal, Mature, and Vice. His aggressive and wild behavior is also reminiscent of Orochi Iori, his SNK counterpart in the SNK vs. Capcom series. Evil Ryu's source of power is said to come from the Satsui no Hado, a dark energy-based force described as taking the spirit to kill the opponent to the extreme and transforming it into a physical power. It is important to point out that although Ryu never showed any signs of the Satsui no Hado's influence after the events of the Street Fighter 4 series, several games present a hypothetical version of Ryu who has embraced the power, willingly or not, becoming Evil Ryu in the process. Furthermore, other media often depicts him temporarily succumbing to the Satsui no Hado. Violent Ken's design and backstory were heavily influenced by Ken's appearance in Street Fighter 2, the animated movie, as stated before, where he was brainwashed by M. Bison. He was designed to be the contrast of how he would be normally, lusting for power just like Evil Ryu, and having no empathy for others, even for the ones he cared about. During Street Fighter 2, the animated movie, Ken is captured, brainwashed, and sent to fight against Ryu, keeping them preoccupied while Bison tracks down Guile. When Ryu undoes the brainwashing, Bison tries to use his psycho power on Ken before turning his attention to Ryu, who defends himself against Bison, initially with little success. Fortunately, Ken uses his master teachings to mend his body and joins the fight. This is very important to point out. In Street Fighter II manga, this is the first appearance of a brainwashed, violent Ken, predating Street Fighter II, the animated movie. However, this incarnation of Ken is not under the control of the Psycho Power. What is Violent Ken's story in Street Fighter and in SNK vs. Capcom, SVC Chaos? In Ultra Street Fighter II, the final challengers, M. Bison takes control of Ken with Psycho Power and turns him into Violent Ken. After mowing through numerous opponents in the tournament, he confronts M. Bison and defeats him. After beating him, Ken regains control over himself as he leaves on his boat. He ponders to himself that he'll never go to the same path as Ryu, but hopes to see him at the end of it. In one of Violent Ken's most amazing crossovers, SNK vs. Capcom SVC Chaos, Ken was being controlled by Shadowloo with Psycho Power. He easily fell to its influence due to his mind getting weaker when he began feeling jealous and impatient to become a better fighter like Ryu, who was surpassing him. Now full of hatred, the Psycho Power enhanced Violent Ken seeks his rival to determine which of them is the strongest, with his flames gaining a purple color. However, when he saw the red headband he gave to Ryu, he returned to his normal self. Regular Ken, while fighting against his violent form in the SVC Chaos, wonders if deep down he desires this. Violent Ken is fought as a sub-boss in the game, with the 7th fight being against either him or Orochi Iori. Both Ken and Violent Ken's ending in the game is almost the same. However, in the beginning of Violent Ken's ending, after the last battle, the evil power that was plaguing Ken lost its hold on him, returning him back to normal. However, after returning home, Ken no longer remembers what happened to him, or what he had done during the duration of his arcade mode story, and then the rest of Ken's ending plays from there. Violent Ken fights using the unnamed Ansatsuken art. Due to his state, Violent Ken is a more ruthless, aggressive, valiant, daring, fearless, and cutthroat version of Ken. His Ansatsuken style uses purple flames instead of regular ones in his Shoryuken, which is a feature of Akuma's Hadokens and Shoryukens from the Marvel vs. Capcom series, and a pillar of deathly energy appears at the end of his Exceed move, which is a feature of Rugal's DMs in The King of Fighters. He seems to speak with a calm, sinister voice, while combining it with incoherent screams similar to Orochi Iori. Ken's attacks and martial arts knowledge can be attributed to the art of the Anatsuken, art referred to as the Shotokan. Anatsuken, translated in English, means assassin's fist, which is a Japanese linguistic neologism used to describe the assassination arts, which consist of any martial art developed with the intention of slaying an opponent. In the Street Fighter universe, the term has been used to describe the martial arts used by Akuma, Goki in Japan, as well as gens. The term Satsujinken, translated to English, means murderous fist and is synonymous with the Anatsuken. These two terms are used interchangeably. The Anatsuken fighting style is used by Ryu and Ken, and by their mentor Goken. In the Street Fighter IV Master's Guide, on pages 6, 7, and 24, in its bio it states that the Anatsuken is a martial art rooted as an art of assassination. It is said that canonically, the assassination art, or Anatsuken, was created by Gotetsu, Goken's and Akuma's mentor. It is stated that Capcom USA originally referred to the fighting style as Shokotan, despite it bearing little resemblance to the real-life discipline of the same name. The real style of the Shokotan is a style of karate, developed from various martial arts. Even though certain characteristics of this art are shared with Capcom's version, it is stated that it's not the same. Common characteristics they might share would be its kata, referring to as detailed choreographed patterns of martial art movements, made to be practiced alone, and kumite, which is sparring with an opponent, something Ken Master and Ryu do a lot. Whoever had the chance to have lived through the 90s era of arcade 2D game fighting can remember all the quarters spent trying to perfect the Hadoken, Shoryuken, or his flying hurricane kick with Ken Masters. These techniques are the holy trinity of attacks that have made Masters one of the most popular in the Street Fighter series. Let us start with the Hadoken. The basic type of Hadoken is a surging punch in which a fighter's willpower is utilized to focus energy into and through the palms. To throw a Hadoken in Street Fighter, you must be in battle against another opponent. There is a very simple button combo that you must input to do a Hadoken. It is down, down forward, forward plus punch. As the palms are thrusted outwards towards the target, a surging energy wave is expelled that results in a punching force traveling through the air in the opponent's direction. In some games, the projectile will have actual energy hands inside it. According to the Street Fighter II official fan book, The Hadouken is said to be as warm as normal body temperature, contrary to popular belief that it is a fireball. The primary use of the Hadouken is to control the horizontal playfield. If thrown at the opponent, they will have to block, jump, or use a special attack to counter. In any case, they will have to act, allowing the player throwing the Hadouken to potentially counter. Another important technique Ken masters utilize is the Shoryuken attack. The Shoryuken, commonly referred to as the Dragon Punch, is Ken master's special attack. Executed by moving the stick forward, down, and then down forward, commonly referred to as the Shoryuken motion, the move is a jumping uppercut in which the user spins upwards with some horizontal movement as well, knocking the opponent to the ground and inflicting damage. The Shoryuken is primarily used as an anti-air move. However, with some practice, it is possible to use it to counterattack almost any move. The trade-off for this is that the user is completely vulnerable to attack as they fall back to the ground and for a split second after landing. In the Street Fighter II series, the Shoryuken is almost completely invincible while rising, meaning it can pass through projectile attacks, potentially striking the recipient in the act of throwing them. Another important attack from Ken Masters is his Satsumaki Seppunkyaku. The Satsumaki Seppunkyaku, which translated to English means Tornado Whirlwind Leg, is also known as Hurricane Kick. Ken Masters jumps and while in the air, rotates his legs, kicking the opponent 1 to 3 times, depending on the button pressed. It is usually performed by moving the joystick or D-pad a quarter circle backwards the opponent from the down position, then pressing a kick button. The Shibu Jinraikyaku, also known as Lightning Speed Leg. This is one of Ken's special attacks. Kusuryu Repa is a combination of both his Shoryuken and Satsumaki variations. Guren Seppunkyaku, also known as Crimson Lotus Whirlwind Leg. This is Ken's second Ultra Combo in Super Street Fighter IV. Guren Ejinkiyaku, also known as Crimson Lotus Flame Swift Leg. This is Ken's critical art in Street Fighter V. We in the Street Fighter verse have 3 separate videos. We go in depth of each of the holy trinity of moves. I will leave the links in the description box. Be sure to check them out. The essence of Ken's origins in the Street Fighter franchise is greatly tied to the bond between him and Ryu. Ken is Ryu's best friend from his childhood, as the two have trained in the same art of Anatsuken for a long time. They share a very close bond with each other, and will help out each other no matter the cost. Both of them have also trained together under Goken. One can see that they care for each other and never quarrel. Ken's able to notice when Ryu is not in the right state of mind as shown in the Alpha series, where Ken gave him his red headband in order for Ryu to stay focused and not lose his way. Although Ryu spends his time training, Ken will go as far as inviting him to his wedding. Ken always assumed that Ryu found himself trivial since he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, while Ryu is an orphan who at the same time lost the man who adopted him. In contrast to this, Ryu believed Ken was the only one he can reach out to when it comes to his internal struggle with the Satsui no Hado. Ken also gets annoyed when multiple people ask where Ryu is, making it seem like Ken is Ryu's personal assistant. The two usually greet each other by exchanging fist bumps, usually before starting a friendly sparring match. In this episode, we talked about the origins of Ken Master's fighting style and his techniques. We have also talked about Ken Master's relationship with his all-time friend, Ryu. We hope that the Street Fighter verse have provided you guys with plenty of information about Ken Master's origins. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell to stay up to date on new theories and info. Thank you for watching. This has been your Street Fighter host. Welcome to the center stage, our new Discord server. There you can talk with us, chat about current events going on in Street Fighter, information, theories, and lore. We'll leave the link in the description box below. We want to thank everyone for tuning in and becoming part of this Street Fighter community. We want to thank you for your positive comments towards our channel because it only habilitates us to grow even more. From the Street Fighterverse crew, we thank you.